My son locked me in his guest bathroom for 96 hours without food or water, just so he could mortgage the roof over my head to a loan shark. He thought I was a senile old man who would die quietly on the cold tile. He thought the $8 million Malibu villa he lived in was his to sell. But when I finally walked out of that bathroom, I didn't call the police. I didn't scream. I simply made one phone call that sold the house from under his feet, canceled his credit cards, and left the country before he even knew he was homeless. My name is Victor Halloway. I am 68 years old, and this is how I taught my son that you never bite the hand that feeds you, especially when that hand still signs the checks. Before I tell you how I destroyed his life, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that respect is earned, not inherited. The thirst was the first thing that woke me. It was a physical weight, heavy and sharp, sitting at the base of my throat, like a stone I had swallowed and could not dislodge. My tongue felt like sandpaper against the roof of my mouth. I tried to swallow, but there was nothing there, just a dry click in my throat that sent a spasm of pain radiating down my neck. I opened my eyes, but the darkness was absolute. For a second, I forgot where I was. I reached out, expecting the soft cotton of my sheets, but my hand met the unforgiving, bone-chilling cold of Italian marble. Then the memory hit me like a physical blow. The bathroom, the guest suite, the door that wouldn't open. It was day 4, or maybe day 5. It was hard to tell in the dark. I tried to push myself up, but my arms trembled violently. My 68-year-old muscles had stiffened from sleeping on the hard floor, curled into a fetal position to conserve warmth. I dragged myself toward the sink, my knees scraping against the grout. I reached up, fumbling for the cold metal of the faucet. I turned the handle. Nothing. Not a drop. Not a gurgle. Just the hollow hiss of air. They had cut the water to this room from the main valve outside. It wasn't an accident. A jammed door is an accident. A jammed door with the water supply specifically severed is a prison. I slumped back against the cabinet, the silence of the room amplifying the pounding of my own heart. But then the silence broke. A heavy rhythmic thumping started to vibrate through the floorboards. Bass. Music. It was coming from downstairs. It was loud, celebratory, the kind of house music Brandon played when he wanted to impress people. I mustered every ounce of strength I had left. I grabbed a heavy brass towel holder I had ripped from the wall 2 days ago and slammed it against the door. Brandon. Brandon, open this door. My voice was a croak, a pathetic rasp that barely carried across the room. I tried again, screaming with my chest, not my throat. Help me. Someone help me. The music didn't stop. If anything, it got louder. I could hear laughter now. The clinking of glass. The distinct, high-pitched shriek of my daughter-in-law Monica laughing at something. They were having a party. My son and his wife were hosting a gala in the very house where his father was slowly dying of dehydration a few feet above their heads. I lay my cheek against the bottom of the door, where a thin sliver of light cut through the darkness. I needed air. The room smelled of stale air and my own fear. Through the crack I saw movement. High heels, expensive red-bottomed heels clicking on the hardwood of the hallway. I knew that walk. It was Monica. She was walking past the door. She had to hear me. I banged the brass pipe against the wood at the bottom of the door right where her feet were. Monica. Please. The door is stuck. I need water. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath. I saw the red heels pivot. She was standing right outside. She knew I was in here. She had to know. For a moment, a wave of relief washed over me. It was just a misunderstanding. The lock had broken. She would get the key. She would get Brandon. Then I saw the toe of her shoe pull back and strike the door. A sharp, dismissive kick. Thud. Shh. Quiet in there. Her voice wasn't muffled. It was clear, sharp, and dripping with annoyance. She wasn't trying to open the door. She was scolding a dog. "The old bear is hibernating, Brandon. Leave him be." She laughed a cruel light sound, and the red heels clicked away down the hall, fading into the thumping bass of the party downstairs. I lay there, the cold marble leaching the heat from my cheek, staring at the empty space where her shadow had been. The realization didn't come all at once. It seeped in slowly like the cold. They knew. They knew I was here. They knew I had no water. And they didn't care. I wasn't a guest in my son's home. I was a prisoner. And tonight, while they drank champagne, I was going to die of thirst. I don't know how much time passed. The music eventually stopped. The laughter died down. The house settled into the heavy creaking silence of the ocean front. My head was spinning lightheaded from hunger and dehydration. I drifted in and out of consciousness, dreams of waterfalls and rainstorms taunting me. I woke up to the sound of voices. They were close, right outside the door. I dragged myself back to the threshold, pressing my ear against the wood. The hunger pains in my stomach had turned into a dull, constant ache, but my mind, fueled by adrenaline and fear, was suddenly razor sharp. It was Brandon. He was pacing. I could hear the heavy tread of his footsteps back and forth. "I don't care what the terms are," he was saying. His voice was tight, stressed. "I need the cash by Friday. 2 million. Yes, hard money is fine. I know the interest rate. Look, the equity is there. The house is appraised at 8.5. I froze. He was taking out a loan. A hard money loan. I knew what that meant. High interest, predatory terms, fast cash for desperate people. Brandon had always been a dreamer, a euphemism for a failure who refused to work. He had burned through 3 startups in 5 years, always funded by my generosity, or by loans he couldn't repay. But this was different. He was leveraging the house he didn't own, or at least the house he didn't know he didn't own. "You don't understand," Brandon hissed into the phone. "The inspection is tomorrow morning at 9. The house will be empty. No, my father isn't a resident. He's in assisted living. He's not here. The property is mine, free and clear. I am the sole occupant." "Yes. Just send the appraiser." The line went dead. I heard him sigh a long, shaky exhalation. So that was it. That was why I was locked in the bathroom. The appraiser was coming. If the bank saw an old man living in the guest suite with his clothes in the closet and his books on the shelves, they would ask questions. They would ask if I had tenancy rights. They would want me to sign a subordination agreement. Brandon needed the house to look like a bachelor pad, a clean asset he could leverage to save whatever sinking ship he was currently captaining. He had locked me away like a piece of unwanted furniture so he could commit mortgage fraud. Then I heard Monica's voice. She must have been sitting on the hallway bench. "Did they agree?" "Yes," Brandon replied. "But the interest is 40%, Monica. If this tech deal doesn't go through next month, we lose the house. They'll foreclose in 30 days. "It will go through," Monica said, her voice dismissive. "You always figure it out." "But what about him?" She gestured toward the bathroom door. I could feel her finger pointing at me through the wood. "He's been in there 4 days, Brandon. What if he's—" "You know," Dead Brandon asked. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold. I held my breath. My own son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had sat with through algebra homework. The boy whose tuition I had paid, whose cars I had bought, whose mistakes I had fixed for 35 years. "If he is," Brandon said, his voice devoid of emotion, devoid of anything human, "then it solves a lot of problems, doesn't it?" "We can say he slipped," Monica suggested. "Or he had a stroke. He's 68, Brandon. It happens. No one would question it. The autopsy would just show dehydration and heart failure. Natural causes. It would save us the cost of a nursing home, Brandon mused. And the trust fund? If he dies, the trust executes immediately, right? I get everything. Not everything. I thought, my anger suddenly hotter than my thirst. You get nothing. You don't know how the trust works because you never bothered to read the documents I gave you. You never bothered to learn how the wealth was built. You just wanted to spend it. I listened as they discussed my potential death with the casual indifference of a couple deciding what to order for dinner. They weren't worried about me suffering. They were worried about the smell. They were worried about the timing of the coroner relative to the appraiser. We should check on him in the morning, Monica said, yawning. After the appraiser leaves. If he's still kicking, we give him some water and tell him the lock was jammed. We play the heroes. If not, well, we call 911 and cry on cue. Let's go to bed, Brandon said. I'm exhausted. This stress is killing me. The stress was killing him. I almost laughed, a dry, hacking sound in my throat. The footsteps receded. The bedroom door down the hall closed. Silence returned to my prison. I sat in the dark, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had evaporated, burned away by a white-hot clarity. For years, I had made excuses for them. I told myself Brandon was just ambitious, just misunderstood. I told myself Monica was just high maintenance but loved him. I had bought this villa 10 years ago through a shell company, an LLC managed by my firm, and allowed them to live here rent-free because I wanted them to have a good start. I kept the deed in the LLC's name for tax purposes, I told them. But deep down, I think I knew. I think I knew that if I gave Brandon the title, he would lose it. But I had never imagined this. I never imagined he would trade my life for a loan. I looked at my hands in the darkness. They were shaking, but not from weakness. They were shaking with rage. I wasn't going to die in this bathroom. I refused. I was going to survive. I was going to walk out of here. And when I did, I was going to burn their world to the ground. I didn't need violence. I didn't need to shout. I was Victor Halloway. I built skyscrapers in Dubai. I negotiated contracts with governments. I had hidden my true net worth and my power from my son to keep him humble, but clearly I had failed. Now I would show him exactly who he was messing with. I spent the rest of the night licking the condensation off the cold water pipes under the sink. It was metallic and dusty, but it was moisture. I paced the small room 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, forcing blood into my legs. I mentally rehearsed every asset I owned, every account number, every legal clause in the trust. I formulated the plan. Morning came. I knew it was morning because the sliver of light under the door turned gray, then white. I heard the doorbell ring downstairs at 9 sharp. The appraiser. I heard Brandon's voice, charming, confident, showing the man around. Yes, Master Sweet, here. Guest rooms all empty. We use them for storage mostly. No tenants. Just my wife and I. I could have screamed. I could have banged on the door right then. The appraiser would have heard me. He would have called the police. Brandon would have been arrested. But arrests take time. Trials take years. And Brandon might get bail. He might talk his way out of it. He might say I was a confused old man who locked himself in. No. I didn't want him arrested. I wanted him destroyed. I wanted him to feel the rug being pulled out from under him when he thought he was standing on solid ground. I wanted him to lose the hope of the money before he lost the house. So I stayed silent. I sat on the toilet lid and waited. An hour later, the front door closed. The appraiser was gone. Brandon had secured his fraudulent valuation. 10 minutes later, I heard the key turn in the lock. It was a distinct click. The lock hadn't been jammed. It hadn't been broken. It worked perfectly. The door swung open. Light flooded the room, blinding me. I squinted, raising a hand to shield my eyes. Brandon stood there, framed in the doorway. He was wearing a crisp white shirt and designer jeans, looking every inch the successful entrepreneur he pretended to be. He held a bottle of expensive mineral water in one hand. But his face was a mask of panic. Not real panic. Rehearsed panic. "Dad! Oh my God! Dad!" He rushed into the room, dropping to his knee beside me. The performance was Oscar-worthy. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight. "Dad, are you okay?" "Jesus, I've been trying to get this door open for days." The lock mechanism seized up completely. I called a locksmith, but it was the weekend, and then no one showed up, and I didn't want to use a crowbar because I was afraid of hitting you if you were on the other side. Lies. Smooth fluid lies pouring out of his mouth. He uncapped the water bottle and pressed it to my lips. "Drink, Dad. Please drink." I was so worried. I thought I lost you. I drank. I gulped the water down, the cool liquid soothing the fire in my throat. But as I drank, I watched him. His eyes weren't on me. They were darting down to his phone, which was buzzing in his other hand. He was checking a notification. Probably the bank. Probably the loan approval. He was holding his dying father with one hand and checking his illicit cash flow with the other. I lowered the bottle, letting out a ragged cough. I let my body go limp, slumping against his chest. I made my hands tremble violently, spilling some of the water onto his expensive shirt. "Brandon," I wheezed, making my voice sound thinner and weaker than it actually was. "Dad, I'm here. It's okay. You're safe now." I thought you left me," I whispered, widening my eyes in feigned terror. "I screamed for you." "Why didn't you hear me?" He didn't flinch. "I was out, Dad. Monica and we were at the hospital. Her mother, she got sick again. We weren't even here. We just got back and realized the door was stuck." Another lie. I had heard the party. I had heard the music. I had heard Monica's heels outside the door. But I nodded. I let tears well up in my eyes. I clung to his shirt like a frightened child. "Oh, thank God," I sobbed. "Thank God you didn't abandon me. I was so scared, Brandon. I'm so old. I get so confused." I felt his muscles relax. He bought it. He thought I was broken. He thought the dehydration and the trauma had scrambled my brain. He thought I bought his story about the locksmith and the hospital. He thought he had gotten away with it. "Let's get you to bed, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with fake solicitation. "We need to get some food in you. You need to rest." He helped me stand. I leaned my entire weight on him, making him drag me. As we walked out of the bathroom, I saw Monica standing at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a silk robe, holding a cup of coffee. She looked at me with disappointment. She hadn't wanted me to walk out of that room. "Oh, Victor!" she exclaimed, putting a hand to her chest. "You poor thing. Is he okay, babe?" "He's fine," Brandon said, shooting her a look. "Just confused, dehydrated. He needs to sleep." We walked past the master bedroom. On the dresser, I saw the paperwork. The loan documents. They were already filled out, just waiting for the final approval. I shuffled my feet, keeping my head down, playing the part of the feeble, grateful victim. "Thank you, son," I mumbled. "Thank you for saving me." "Don't worry about anything, Dad," Brandon said, guiding me into my bedroom. "I'll take care of everything. I'll handle the bills, the house, everything. You just rest." I lay down on the bed. He pulled the comforter up to my chin. "I'll bring you some soup," he said. He walked to the door. Before he closed it, he looked at me one last time. It wasn't a look of love. It was a look of calculation. He was assessing how much longer I had left. He was doing the math. He closed the door. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade down the hall. I waited until I heard him laughing with Monica downstairs. Then I threw the covers off. I sat up on the edge of the bed. My weakness vanished. My hands stopped shaking. I reached under my mattress into the slit I had cut into the box spring months ago for emergencies. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of my burner phone and the leather of my passport holder. Brandon thought he had won. He thought he had secured his $2 million and his $8 million villa. He thought his father was a senile old man who would sign whatever piece of paper was put in front of him. He was wrong. I wasn't just his father. I was the man who owned the shell company that held the deed to this house. I was the man who had the power to liquidate every asset he was currently touching. I powered on the phone. The battery was at 40%. Enough. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Leonard, I said, when the voice answered on the second ring. It's Victor. Victor, it's Sunday. Is everything all right? No, I said, my voice cold and steady. Everything is over. I need you to execute the emergency clause on the Malibu property. Yes, the distressed asset protocol. There was a pause on the line. Leonard Katz had been my lawyer for 30 years. He knew what that clause meant. It meant a fire sale. It meant immediate liquidation. Are you sure, Victor? That means selling below market value? You'll lose millions. I'm not losing anything, Leonard, I replied, staring at the door my son had just closed. I'm paying a tuition fee. I want the house sold to a cash buyer. Today, I don't care about the price. Drop it by 20–30% if you have to. I want the title transferred within 48 hours. Understood, Leonard said, his tone shifting to professional steel. What about Brandon? Brandon doesn't live here anymore, I said. He just doesn't know it yet. I hung up the phone. Downstairs, I heard the pop of a champagne cork. They were celebrating. They were toasting to their crime. Let them drink. It would be the last expensive bottle they ever touched. The clock was ticking, and by the time it stopped, my son wouldn't just be homeless. He would be facing a level of ruin he didn't even know existed. I lay back down, closed my eyes, and waited for my soup. The game had just begun. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary wafted up the stairs, a sensory taunt after 4 days of breathing sewer gas and mildew. Brandon knocked on my bedroom door. It was a soft, rhythmic rap, the kind you use on a child's door when you want to apologize without actually saying the words. Dinner is ready, Dad, he called out. We made something special, a welcome-back meal. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, letting the rage settle into a cold, hard pit in my stomach. They weren't cooking for me. They were fattening the calf before the slaughter. I sat up deliberately, engaging my core to make the movement look difficult, shuffling my feet against the hardwood as I walked to the door. I opened it to find Brandon smiling, a fresh shirt, replacing the one I had stained with water earlier. He offered me his arm. I took it, leaning heavily, letting him support a weight I didn't need him to carry. We descended the spiral staircase of the villa I had paid for with the sweat of 30 years in construction sites and boardrooms. The dining room was set for a coronation. Crystal goblets, silver cutlery, and a centerpiece of white lilies that looked like they had been stolen from a funeral home. Monica was placing a tureen of soup on the table. She looked up, her face arranging itself into a mask of exaggerated relief. Victor, she cooed, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. Sit. You must be starving. We ordered lobster bisque from that place you love on the pier. I sat. The chair felt like a throne, or perhaps an electric chair. They took their seats on either side of me, flanking me like guards. Brandon poured wine, a heavy dark Cabernet. He filled my glass to the brim, then his, then hers. His hand was steady, but I saw a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. The clock was ticking for him. The hard money loan needed to close. The appraiser had come and gone, but the paperwork wasn't finished. He needed one more thing. To family, Brandon said, raising his glass. To having you back, Dad. We were terrifyingly close to losing you. I raised my glass, my hand trembling just enough to make the wine slosh against the sides. To family, I whispered. We drank. The wine was good. Expensive. Probably bought with one of the emergency credit cards I paid off every month. I took a spoonful of the bisque. It was rich, creamy, and hot. My stomach clenched, not used to food, but I forced it down. I needed the energy. So Dad Brandon started setting his glass down a little too hard. We need to talk about what happened. About the bathroom. I kept eating, keeping my eyes on the bowl. What about it? I mumbled. It's concerning. Monica interjected, leaning forward. Her perfume was cloying a floral assault. You locking yourself in like that. Forgetting how to open the door. Not calling out for days. It's not normal behavior, Victor. I didn't lock myself in, I said, letting a note of confusion enter my voice. The door, it just stuck. The lock was fine, Dad, Brandon said gently, his voice dripping with gaslighting. I checked it myself, it wasn't locked. You couldn't figure it out. And that's okay. It happens. Age happens to all of us. But we can't ignore it. I looked up at him. His eyes were wide, pleading, projecting a concern that was entirely manufactured. He was building a narrative. He was writing the script of my senility in real time. What are you saying, son? I'm saying we need to be realistic, Brandon said. You're 68. You're living in this big house. You're forgetting things. You're vulnerable. God forbid if the house caught fire, or if you had a medical emergency you wouldn't be able to manage. He reached under the table. I heard the rustle of paper. My muscles tensed. Here it comes. The kill shot. He placed a thick document on the tablecloth right next to my wine glass. It was stapled crisp and terrifyingly official. I had Leonard draw this up a while ago, just in case Brandon lied. Leonard Katz wouldn't draw up a suicide note for his oldest client without calling me first. This was a template, a download from the internet. It's a power of attorney, Dad. Specifically, a durable financial and medical power of attorney. I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes, not because I couldn't read them, but because the audacity was blinding. It granted Brandon Halloway full authority to manage my assets, sell my property, access my bank accounts, and make medical decisions on my behalf if I were deemed incapacitated. And judging by the conversation we were having, my incapacitation was already a decided fact in his mind. Why, I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of acting and genuine fury. Why do I need this? Because I need to pay the bills, Dad Brandon said, his patience thinning. I need to handle the maintenance on the house. I need to make sure your insurance is paid. I can't do that if I have to ask you for a signature every time you get confused or lock yourself in a bathroom. This just lets me take care of you. It lets me handle the heavy lifting so you can rest. Sign it, Victor, Monica urged, pushing a pen toward me. It's for your own good. We just want you to be safe. I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc, a gift I had given Brandon for his college graduation. He was using my own gift to sign away my life. I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I watched Brandon's eyes. They were laser-focused on the tip of the pen, hungry, desperate. He needed this signature. The loan shark probably required a title transfer or a guarantor. And since the house was in an LLC, he needed control of the LLC. This document would give him that control. If I signed this, I was homeless. If I signed this, I was dead. I picked up the pen. I brought it to the paper. Brandon held his breath. Monica leaned in. I don't know, I stammered. I should read it first. There's nothing to read. Dad, Brandon snapped, his voice cracking. It's standard legal jargon. Just sign the damn paper so we can eat. He realized his mistake immediately. He softened his tone. Please, Dad. Just sign it. For my peace of mind. I nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, son. If you say so. I moved the pen to the signature line, but as I did, I let my elbow spasm. A violent, jerky movement. My arm lashed out, hitting the heavy crystal goblet of red wine. It tipped. The dark liquid surged out like a tidal wave, crashing directly onto the document. The paper soaked it up instantly, turning from crisp white to a soggy, bleeding purple. The ink of the printed text blurred into illegibility. The wine spread across the tablecloth, dripping onto Brandon's lap. No, Brandon roared, jumping up. He grabbed the document, shaking it, purple drops flying everywhere. It was ruined. A sodden, useless pulp. Dad. What is wrong with you? He screamed, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. I shrank back in my chair, dropping the pen. Oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy. My hand. It just jumped. Monica was dabbing at the table with a napkin, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. You ruined it, she hissed. You ruined the whole document. Brandon threw the soggy paper onto the floor. He looked like he wanted to hit me. He looked like he wanted to finish the job the bathroom hadn't. He ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. He was calculating. It was Sunday night. No lawyers were open. He couldn't get another draft printed and notarized until tomorrow morning. But the loan shark was expecting the paperwork first thing. I'm sorry, Brandon, I whined, playing the pathetic old man to the hilt. I'm just so shaky. I'm so sorry. It's fine. Brandon choked out, his voice tight with suppressed violence. It's fine, we'll do it tomorrow. I'll print another one in the morning. We'll go to the notary together. I nodded eagerly. Yes, tomorrow. I'll sign it tomorrow, when I've had some sleep. I'm just so tired right now. Go to bed, Brandon said, not looking at me. Just go to bed, Dad. I stood up, using the table for support. I looked at the mess I had made. The wine looked like blood on the white cloth. A foreshadowing. Good night, son, I said. Thank you for the soup. I shuffled out of the room. I felt their eyes boring into my back. They hated me. They despised my weakness, my age, my existence. They thought they had lost a day, a minor inconvenience. They didn't realize they had just lost everything. I climbed the stairs, my heart hammering a rhythm of war. Tomorrow. He wanted to go to the notary tomorrow. He wouldn't get the chance. By the time the sun rose, I would be gone, and the avalanche I was about to trigger would be unstoppable. I went into my room and locked the door. Not because I was afraid of being locked in again, but because I needed privacy for what came next. I pulled my burner phone from under the mattress. It was time to make the call that would turn their villa into a tomb. I had bought myself 12 hours. I only needed one. The soup was cold in my stomach, but the taste of victory was already sweet on my tongue. The sun was blinding when I stepped out the front door, a stark contrast to the 4 days of darkness I had just survived. I shuffled my feet, leaning heavily on a cane I had dug out of the closet, a prop from a knee surgery 5 years ago that I no longer needed. Brandon was in the kitchen, furiously typing on his laptop, his phone pressed between his ear and shoulder. He barely looked up when I told him I needed fresh air. He just waved a hand, dismissive, distracted by the frantic reconstruction of the document I had ruined with red wine the night before. He told me to stay in the driveway, to not wander off. I nodded my head, bobbing with the exaggerated tremors of the elderly, and closed the door behind me. I walked down the long paved driveway of the villa, the gravel crunching under my orthopedic shoes. I stopped at the mailbox, pretending to catch my breath, checking to see if he was watching from the window. He wasn't. He was too busy trying to figure out how to mortgage a property he didn't own to pay off a debt he couldn't afford. The moment I turned the corner out of sight of the house, the cane lifted off the ground. My back straightened. The shuffle disappeared, replaced by the long, purposeful strides of a man who had walked construction sites in steel-toed boots for 40 years. I checked my watch. 9:15. Leonard was never late. 2 blocks away, parked in the shadow of a large oak tree near the community park, was a black sedan. Tinted windows. Nondescript. It was the kind of car that whispered power without shouting money. I opened the back door and slid into the cool leather interior. Leonard Katz sat in the front seat, turning to face me. He looked older than the last time I saw him, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his gaze was as sharp as a razor. He took in my appearance, the slightly gaunt cheeks, the dark circles under my eyes, the way my hands were clenched into fists on my knees. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew better. He knew that if I was calling a meeting like this, things were far beyond okay. "You look like hell, Victor," Leonard said, his voice a low rumble. "I feel like I just woke up from a coma," I replied, my voice devoid of the tremor I used with my son. "Drive. Just drive around the block. I don't want to be stationary." The car pulled away from the curb, gliding silently through the streets of Malibu. We passed mansions with manicured lawns, the kind of places owned by tech moguls and movie stars, the kind of place my son thought he owned. So Leonard said, watching me in the rearview mirror, "You want to trigger the distress clause on the Malibu property. Talk to me. What did Brandon do? Did he miss a rent payment? Did he throw a party that got the cops called? He tried to kill me, Leonard." The car didn't swerve, but I felt the tension snap into the air like a rubber band. Leonard slowed down, pulling the car to a crawl. "Explain," he said. I told him. I told him about the bathroom, the 4 days without water, the conversation through the door, the loan shark, the appraiser, the plan to let me die or declare me incompetent so he could leverage the equity. I told him about the soup and the power of attorney document I had destroyed. I spoke calmly, methodically, listing the facts as if I were outlining a structural failure in a building blueprint. But with every word, I felt the cold fury rising again, a tide of ice in my veins. When I finished, the silence in the car was heavy, suffocating. Leonard, a man who had practiced law for 40 years and heard every kind of human depravity, looked pale. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "Jesus, Victor," he whispered. "He's your son." "He's a stranger," I corrected. "A stranger who thinks I'm a resource to be mined. And he's about to find out that the mine has collapsed." Leonard took a breath, composing himself. He switched back into lawyer mode, the professional armor sliding into place. "Okay, so he needs the power of attorney because the title isn't in his name. It's in the LLC." "Correct," I said. This was the secret. The weapon I had kept buried for 10 years. The weapon Brandon was too lazy and too arrogant to uncover. When I bought the villa, I didn't put it in my name, and I certainly didn't put it in his. I created a shell company, Terra Firma Holdings LLC, a faceless, boring corporate entity managed by my firm. Brandon lived there. He told his friends it was his. He told his girlfriends it was his. He even paid the utilities to keep up the charade. But he never saw the deed. He never saw the tax bills, which went directly to Leonard's office. He assumes because I let him live there rent-free that the house is part of his future inheritance, or that I hold the title personally and would just sign it over. He doesn't understand that legally he is a squatter, a guest who has overstayed his welcome by a decade. The loan shark won't lend against the house unless Brandon can prove ownership or control, Leonard mused. That's why he needs you to sign. He needs control of the LLC. Exactly, I said. And he thinks he has time. He thinks he has me trapped in that house, confused and weak. He thinks he can print a new document today and bully me into signing it tomorrow. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the front seat. I want the house sold, Leonard. Today. Leonard frowned, glancing at the dashboard clock. It's Sunday, Victor, and it's an $8 million property. You don't just sell a Malibu villa in an afternoon. The market is soft. It takes months to find a qualified buyer, inspections, escrow. I don't want a market sale, I cut him off. I want a liquidation. I want you to contact the Chen family. Leonard's eyes widened. The Chens. They've been trying to buy into this neighborhood for 2 years, I said. You told me last month they made a cash-off offer on the property next door and got outbid. They have liquid capital. They want a trophy home. Call them. Victor, Leonard warned, his voice cautious. If you go to them directly with a distress sale, they are going to smell blood. They will lowball you. You're going to lose 20%, maybe more. We're talking about walking away from almost $2 million just to speed this up. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You think I care about the money, Leonard? I have enough money to buy this neighborhood. This isn't a financial transaction. It's an eviction. It's an exorcism. I looked out the window at the ocean flashing by between the houses. I want you to offer it to them for $6.5 million. Cash, as is. No inspections, no contingencies. But the closing has to happen in 48 hours. The title transfer happens immediately. Leonard let out a low whistle. 6.5. They'd be idiots to say no. They'll wire the funds before lunch. That's the point, I said. I want the ink dry before Brandon even knows the house is on the market. I want the new owners walking through the front door while he's still trying to figure out how to forge my signature. But Victor, Leonard pressed, playing the devil's advocate as a good lawyer should. The house is full of his things, his furniture, his life. The contract usually gives 30 days for possession. No possession clause, I said firmly. Immediate occupancy. The Chens can have the furniture. They can have the art. They can have the clothes in the closet for all I care. I want the contract to state that the property is sold, contents included. Brandon leaves with what he can carry. Leonard stayed silent for a long moment, processing the brutality of the move. It was nuclear. It was total war. It was the kind of maneuver we used against hostile corporate takeovers, not against family. Are you sure? Leonard asked softly. Once I make this call, Victor, it's done. The Chens don't play games. If we sign, the house is theirs. Brandon will be on the street. And if he really owes money to loan sharks, this could get dangerous for him. I thought about the bathroom again. I thought about the darkness. I thought about the sound of Monica's heels clicking past the door while I begged for water. I thought about them discussing my death as a convenience. They hadn't cared if it got dangerous for me. They had manufactured the danger. He's a grown man, I said, my voice cold as the marble floor I had slept on. He made his choices. He chose to gamble. He chose to steal. He chose to treat his father like a disposable asset. Now he can deal with the creditors himself. Maybe it will teach him the value of $1. Or maybe it won't. But it's not my problem anymore. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was a list of account numbers. After the sale, I continued, I want you to take the proceeds, combine them with my personal liquid assets, and transfer everything to the Cayman Trust we set up last year. Then I want you to book me a flight. Where are you going? Italy, I said. Tuscany. I haven't been there since Martha died. I want to sit in a vineyard and drink wine that doesn't taste like betrayal. Leonard nodded slowly. He pulled the car over to the curb a few streets away from the villa. He took out his phone. I'll call the Chen's attorney now, he said. They're usually up early. If they agree to the terms, I can have the digital contracts ready for you to sign by noon. Where will you be? I have to go back, I said. I have to play the part for one more day. Brandon is planning a party for tonight. A product launch, he calls it. He's invited investors. He's invited the elite. He thinks he's going to use the house to dazzle them into giving him money. A party? Leonard asked, incredulous. He locked you in a bathroom for 4 days and now he's throwing a party. He thinks I'm resting in my room, I said. He thinks I'm broken. He told me to stay out of sight tonight, to stay in the maid's quarters so I don't embarrass him. I opened the car door, the fresh sea air hitting my face. I'll sign the papers electronically from my room, I said. Get it done, Leonard. And hire security, private security. When the Chens take possession, I want a team there to ensure the transition is smooth. I don't want Brandon to have the chance to damage the property when he realizes what's happening. I will, Leonard said. Victor, be careful. If he finds out what you're doing before the deal closes, he won't, I said. He's too busy counting money he doesn't have. I stepped out of the car and began the transformation again. I hunched my shoulders. I let my hands tremble. I picked up the cane. The powerful architect vanished, replaced by the frail, confused victim. I shuffled back toward the house, toward the prison that was about to become a stage. The deal was in motion. The clock was ticking. Brandon had his party tonight. He wanted to show off his empire. I was going to make sure he had an audience for his execution. I shuffled back into the house through the side door, the heavy oak panel closing behind me with a soft click that felt like the locking of a vault. The silence of the morning had been replaced by a chaotic symphony of excess. The Villa My Villa was being transformed. A team of caterers in black uniforms scurried through the hallway carrying trays of crystal and silver. A florist was constructing an archway of white orchids that must have cost $5,000 alone. In the living room, technicians were installing a lighting rig that looked suitable for a rock concert, drilling into the hand-plastered ceiling I had commissioned 10 years ago. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, leaning on my cane, watching the destruction of my sanctuary. They weren't just decorating. They were staging a performance. Brandon was in the center of the storm, barking orders into a headset while pointing aggressively at a team of movers who were rearranging the furniture. He looked manic. His eyes were wide, his movements jerky. It was the energy of a gambler who had put his last chip on the table and was trying to will the roulette ball into the right slot. No, the ice sculpture goes by the pool, he shouted, his voice cracking. And where is the branding? I want the logo projected on the waterfall. Make it bigger. I want them to see it from the highway. The logo, Project Infinity, a company that existed only on a glossy website and in Brandon's delusions. It was supposed to be a revolutionary AI platform. I knew for a fact it was a shell, a few lines of stolen code wrapped in buzzwords and venture capital fraud. He was throwing this party to raise $5 million. He was using my house as the bait to hook whales, hoping their greed would blind them to the fact that he had nothing to sell but smoke. I walked slowly into the room. Brandon spun around, his face tightening when he saw me. He tapped his headset, muting the call. Dad, he hissed, rushing over to me. What are you doing walking around? Look at this place. It's a madhouse. You could get hurt. He didn't care if I got hurt. He cared that I looked like a ghost. I was wearing the same stained clothes from yesterday. I hadn't shaved. I looked exactly like what I was portraying, a confused, neglected old man. A blemish on his perfect image. I wanted to see, I mumbled, gesturing vaguely at the lights. It's so bright, Brandon. What's happening? It's the launch, Dad, he said, his voice tight with impatient condescension. I told you. Tonight is the night. The investors are coming. The press is coming. This is it. This is the night everything changes. He gripped my arm, his fingers digging into the loose skin. Listen to me, Dad. This is vital. Tonight has to be perfect. These people, they judge everything. They judge the house, the food, the atmosphere. They need to see success. They need to see power. He looked me up and down, his lip curling in distaste. They can't see you. Not like this. You look sick, Dad. You look like you belong in a hospital. If they see you wandering around, drooling and shaking, they'll think I can't even manage my own family. They'll think I'm weak, and nobody invests in weak. I stared at him, letting my mouth hang open slightly. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just ashamed of me. He viewed me as a liability to his fraud. So what do? I whispered. Brandon sighed, steering me toward the back of the house, away from the ocean view, away from the light. I've set up the maid's quarters for you, he said. The maid's quarters, a small windowless room off the laundry area. It had a twin bed and a small television. It was where the cleaning staff took breaks. It was the only room in the 8,000 square foot house that didn't have a view of the Pacific. It's comfortable, he insisted, pushing me along. It's quiet. You won't hear the music. You can just sleep. I'll bring you dinner later once the speeches are over. Just stay there. Okay. Lock the door from the inside if you have to. Just don't come out until the last guest leaves. He stopped at the door to the laundry room. He looked at me, waiting for resistance. He was ready to bully me, to threaten me. He was ready to use the power of attorney argument again. I looked at the small, dark room. It was a cell, another prison. But unlike the bathroom, this one had a purpose. It was the backstage area for my final act. Okay, son, I said softly, lowering my head. I don't want to ruin your big night. I'll stay in the room. I'll be quiet. Relief washed over his face. It was almost insulting how easily he believed I had given up. Thanks, Dad, he said, patting my shoulder. It's for the best. You'll be safe here. He turned and walked away, already speaking into his headset again, shouting about canapes and champagne vintages. He didn't look back. He didn't see me straighten my spine. He didn't see the cold smile that touched my lips. I walked into the maid's room and closed the door. I didn't lock it. I wouldn't be staying long. I sat on the narrow bed and pulled out my burner phone. It was 11:00 a.m. Leonard's message was waiting. The contract is signed. The wire transfer from the Chen family has cleared. The funds are in the Cayman Trust. The deed transfer has been electronically recorded with the county clerk. As of 10:45 a.m., Terra Firma Holdings LLC no longer owns the property. The new owners, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, have been notified that the property is ready for immediate possession. Their security team is en route. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. It was done. The house didn't belong to me anymore, and it certainly didn't belong to Brandon. He was currently spending thousands of dollars decorating a stranger's living room. He was setting up a stage on land he was trespassing on. I sent a text back to Leonard. Is everything in place for tonight? The reply came instantly. Yes. The Chens will arrive at 8:30 p.m. My team will be with them. Victor, are you sure you want to be there? It's going to be volatile. I typed my response slowly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I put the phone away. Now I had to prepare. Brandon thought I was a senile old man in stained clothes. He had forgotten that before I retired, I was known as the Iron Architect. He had forgotten that I had a closet full of clothes he never looked at because they weren't trendy designer labels. I waited. The hours ticked by. I could hear the house transforming, the thumping of the sound system being tested, the clatter of dishes, the high-pitched voice of Monica screaming at a makeup artist. At 6:00 p.m. the party started. I could hear the cars arriving, the heavy thud of luxury doors closing, the murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses. The music started a sophisticated jazz loop that screamed old money. I stood up. I went to the small closet in the maid's room where I had stashed my garment bag earlier that morning right after I returned from the car. Brandon had been so busy screaming about ice sculptures he hadn't noticed me carrying it in under my arm. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a suit. Not just any suit. It was a bespoke charcoal gray three-piece from Savile Row, cut to fit me perfectly. It was the suit I had worn to ring the bell at the stock exchange when my company went public 20 years ago. It was the armor of a man who built empires. I stripped off the stained t-shirt and the baggy sweatpants. I washed my face in the small sink, scrubbing away the grime and the acting. I shaved with the razor I had packed, revealing the sharp jawline that age hadn't softened. I combed my silver hair back. I put on the crisp white shirt, the silk tie, the vest, the jacket. I fastened the gold cufflinks my wife had given me on our 30th anniversary. I looked in the small, cracked mirror on the wall. The old man was gone. The victim was gone. Victor Halloway stared back, and he looked ready for war. I checked my watch. 7:55 p.m. I opened the door of the maid's room. The hallway was empty. Everyone was in the main atrium. I could hear Brandon's voice over the microphone. He was starting his speech. "Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the future." I walked down the service corridor, my Italian leather shoes making a sharp, authoritative click on the tile. I reached the heavy double doors that led to the main hall. I paused. I could hear him lying. This villa, Brandon was saying, his voice booming with unearned pride, represents what Project Infinity is all about. Vision. Stability. A foundation for the future. My wife and I have built this home just as we are building this company. With passion. With integrity. The word hung in the air, toxic and false. I pushed the doors open. I didn't sneak in. I didn't shuffle. I walked out onto the landing of the grand staircase directly above the crowd. The room was packed. 200 people in black tie and evening gowns holding champagne flutes. The lighting was dim, focused on Brandon, who stood on a raised platform near the fountain. Monica was next to him, beaming, holding a bottle of champagne she was about to pop. They looked perfect. They looked rich. They looked untouchable. Then someone in the crowd looked up. A woman gasped. Heads started to turn. The murmur of the crowd died down, rippling into silence. Brandon stopped mid-sentence. He followed the gaze of the room. He looked up. He saw me. For a second, he didn't recognize me. He was looking for a hunched, broken old man in rags. Instead, he saw a titan in a $3,000 suit, standing tall, looking down at him with the cold judgment of a god. "Dad," he whispered into the microphone. The sound amplified his confusion to the entire room. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, my hands resting on the marble balustrade. I held his gaze. I saw the color drain from his face. I saw the panic ignite in his eyes. He knew. In that split second before a single word was spoken, he knew the script had changed. Whatever he was about to say died in his throat. Because at that exact moment, the heavy front doors of the villa directly behind the crowd swung open with a crash. The silence shattered. Heads turned again. Leonard Katz walked in. He was flanked by 4 men in dark tactical uniforms, with security badges on their chests. And behind them walked a quiet, elegant Chinese couple. Brandon stepped down from the podium, his microphone feedbacking with a high-pitched squeal. "Who are you?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is a private event. Security." "Get them out. There was no security." He hadn't paid them. Leonard didn't stop. He walked straight through the crowd, the guests parting like the Red Sea. He walked right up to the podium, reaching into his briefcase. Brandon Halloway. Leonard asked, his voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "Yes, who the hell are you? You're ruining my launch." Leonard pulled out a document with a red seal. He held it up. "I am Leonard Katz, attorney for the owners of this property, and I am afraid you are the one trespassing." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the party. What Brandon laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That's insane. This is my house. My father gave it to me." "I didn't give you anything," I said. My voice boomed from the top of the stairs. It was deep, steady, and powerful. Brandon spun around to look at me. I let you stay here, Brandon. I continued descending the stairs slowly, one step at a time. I let you pretend. But the lease is up. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I walked through the stunned crowd who stared at me with a mix of awe and terror. I walked up to my son. Up close I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like cheap sweat under expensive cologne. Dad. What are you doing? He hissed, leaning in his eyes, darting around at the investors. You're embarrassing me. Go back to your room. We'll talk about this later. There is no later, I said loud enough for the investors in the front row to hear. And there is no room. This house was sold this morning. I gestured to the Chinese couple standing with Leonard. Meet Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I said. The new owners. Brandon looked at them, then at me, then at Monica. Monica had dropped the champagne bottle. It shattered on the floor, exploding into foam and glass, but no one moved. Sold, Brandon whispered. You can't sell it. You're senile. You signed... I signed nothing, I said, leaning in close so only he could see the fire in my eyes. I spilled soup on your fraud, and then I sold the asset you tried to steal. Leonard stepped forward. Mr. Holloway, the contract stipulates immediate possession. The property must be vacated. Now, the new owners wish to secure the premises. This is a joke, Monica shrieked, stepping forward. This is our house, we have rights, we have a party. You have nothing, I said, turning to her. You have no deed. You have no lease. You have no equity. And as of right now, you have no guests. I turned to the crowd. I saw the bankers. I saw the tech investors. I saw the loan sharks heavy in the back corner. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, I apologize for the inconvenience, but this product launch is a fraud, just like the man hosting it. The party is over. Please vacate the premises immediately. Chaos erupted. But it wasn't the chaos of a party. It was the chaos of a sinking ship. The investors turned on their heels. The bankers pulled out their phones. The loan shark's man started walking toward Brandon with a look that promised violence. Brandon stood frozen in the center of his collapsing world. He looked at me, tears of rage and disbelief streaming down his face. You did this, he screamed. You ruined me. Why would you do this? I looked at him. I looked at the son who had locked me in a bathroom to die of thirst. Because you forgot who built the roof over your head, I said softly. And now you're going to learn what it feels like to stand in the rain. I turned my back on him and walked toward Leonard. The security team moved in to clear the room. The music died. The lights stayed on, illuminating the wreckage of a life built on lies. My son was screaming, but I was no longer listening. I had a plane to catch. The bass from the DJ booth vibrated through the soles of my Italian leather shoes, a rhythmic thumping that felt less like music and more like the heartbeat of a beast about to be slaughtered. I stood in the shadows of the upper gallery, hidden by a marble pillar, looking down at the circus my son had erected on my grave. It was magnificent in its vulgarity. The atrium was awash in purple and blue lighting, casting an underwater glow on the hundreds of guests milling about below. Waiters navigated the crush with trays of caviar and towers of Wagyu beef sliders. A fountain of champagne flowed in the center of the room, flanked by ice sculptures carved into the shape of the infinity symbol. Outside, through the open floor-to-ceiling glass doors, I could see the valet parking lot. It looked like a showroom for a luxury car dealership. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys. Brandon had managed to attract the sharks. He had baited the water with the scent of old money, my money, and they were circling hungry for a piece of the next big thing. I adjusted my silk tie, feeling the cool metal of my gold cufflinks against my wrist. They were heavy, grounding. I wasn't the trembling old man who had begged for water yesterday. I was the man who had designed the skyline of 3 different cities. I was the man who knew that a building is only as strong as its foundation, and Brandon had built his castle on quicksand. I watched him. He was standing on a raised platform near the grand piano, a microphone in his hand. He looked the part. His tuxedo was midnight blue, tailored to hide the softness of a life without manual labor. He was sweating, but under the lights, it looked like the glow of exertion, not panic. He was in his element, selling a dream that didn't exist to people who had too much money and not enough sense. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon's voice boomed through the high-end speakers, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Thank you all for coming tonight. Look around you. This isn't just a house. This isn't just a view. This is a testament to what is possible when you refuse to compromise. He swept his arm wide, encompassing the room, the art on the walls, the ocean view beyond the glass. When my wife and I built this home, we wanted it to be a sanctuary for innovation. We wanted a place where the future could be written. And that is exactly what Project Infinity is. It is the architecture of tomorrow. Just as this villa stands firm against the tides of the Pacific, our technology stands firm against the volatility of the market. I listened to him take credit for the beams I had selected, the stone I had imported, the very air he was breathing. He spoke of hard work and sleepless nights appropriating my biography and pasting it over his own history of mediocrity. The crowd nodded, mesmerized. They weren't looking at his balance sheet. They were looking at the chandelier. They were looking at the perceived wealth, and in their minds, wealth equaled competence. To my left, near the sweeping curve of the grand staircase, I saw Monica. She wasn't listening to her husband. She was working her own angle. She held a smartphone attached to a stabilizer gimbal, a ring light clipped to the top, broadcasting her vanity to the world. She was live streaming. I moved slightly, shifting my angle to see her screen. She was walking backward, framing herself against the backdrop of my living room. "Hey guys," she chirped, her voice pitched high for her digital audience. "Welcome to our humble abode for the launch party. Look at these flowers. I had them flown in from Ecuador this morning. I wanted everything to be white and pristine, just like the vision for our new company." She spun around, panning the camera over a seating area featuring a velvet sofa I had bought in Milan. "And this is my favorite spot," she continued. "This is where Brandon and I sit every morning with our coffee and brainstorm. We designed this room to maximize the natural light. It's so important to curate your environment for success. You know, if you want to live a high-vibration life, you have to surround yourself with high-vibration things." High vibration. The only thing vibrating in that house was the phone in Brandon's pocket, likely blowing up with messages from the loan shark wondering why the title transfer hadn't gone through yet. She walked over to a wall adorned with a large abstract painting. It was an original I had acquired at an auction in London 15 years ago. It was worth more than the combined annual salary of everyone in that room. "This piece," Monica said, touching the canvas with her manicured nails, leaving a smudge of oil from her skin on the priceless pigment. "We picked this up on our last trip to Europe. It just spoke to us. It represents the chaos of creation. It's so personal to us. It was personal, but not to them. It was the painting Martha and I had bought to celebrate our 20th anniversary. It was the last big purchase we made before she got sick." Seeing Monica touch it, claiming it as a prop for her influencer narrative, ignited a cold fire in my chest that burned hotter than the thirst had. They had stolen my water. They had stolen my safety. Now they were stealing my history. Enough. The word didn't leave my lips, but it rang in my head like a gavel strike. It was time. I stepped out from behind the pillar. I didn't rush. Men of power do not rush. I walked to the top of the grand staircase, the focal point of the entire atrium. I stood there for a moment, a silhouette against the backlit hallway. I smoothed the front of my charcoal vest. I checked the break of my trousers on my shoes. I was impeccable. I was the Iron Architect. Below me, the party raged on. Brandon was building to his crescendo. "We are asking for $5 million tonight," he shouted, his voice rising with passion. "Not as a donation, but as an invitation. An invitation to join us at the summit, to share in this life, to share in this success." I took the first step down. My leather sole hit the marble stair with a sharp, deliberate clack. It was a sound that cut through the ambient noise of the party like a gunshot. I took the second step. Clack. A woman in the front row, a socialite wearing diamonds that looked heavy enough to drown her, glanced up. Her eyes widened. She nudged the man beside her. He looked up. I took the third step. Clack. The ripple effect was instantaneous. It started from the base of the stairs and spread outward. Faces turned upward. Conversations died mid-sentence. The clinking of glasses stopped. The DJ, sensing the shift in the room's energy, faded the music down, leaving only the echo of Brandon's voice. And when we look back on this night, we will remember. Brandon faltered. He saw the audience looking past him, looking over his shoulder. He saw the confusion on their faces. He turned around. His eyes traveled up the length of the staircase. They landed on me. For a heartbeat, there was no recognition. He was looking for a prop. He was looking for the shuffling, stained, broken old man he had stashed in the maid's room like a dirty secret. He was looking for a victim. Instead, he saw a predator. He saw the suit. The cut was perfect, emphasizing the breadth of my shoulders and the straightness of my spine. He saw the silver hair combed back and gleaming. He saw the jawline freshly shaven and set in stone. He saw the eyes clear, sharp, and utterly merciless. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical effect. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The microphone in his hand dropped to his side, thumping against his leg. "Dad," he mouthed. The word was a whisper, but in the sudden, suffocating silence of the room, it carried to the back corners. I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I kept descending one step at a time, my eyes locked on his. I was the descending blade of a guillotine. Monica, who had been busy reading comments on her live stream, finally noticed the silence. She turned the camera around. She looked up. Her reaction was visceral. She dropped the phone. It clattered onto the marble floor, cracking the screen, the ring light flickering and dying. She took a step back, her hand flying to her throat. She looked at me as if she were seeing a ghost. In a way, she was. She was seeing the ghost of the man she thought she had buried in that bathroom. I reached the landing halfway down the stairs. I stopped. I placed one hand on the railing. I surveyed the crowd. I saw the bankers. I saw the investors. I saw the loan shark's enforcer standing near the bar, looking bored but dangerous. I let the silence stretch. I let it become uncomfortable. I let it become unbearable. I wanted them to feel the weight of my presence. I wanted them to understand that the man on the podium was a child playing dress-up, and the adult had finally entered the room. Brandon took a stumbling step toward the stairs. "Dad, what? What are you doing?" He hissed, his voice picking up on the microphone again, sending a frantic, wet sound through the speakers. "Go back to your room. You're sick. You're confused." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the terror in his eyes. He knew. Deep down in the reptile part of his brain, he knew the game was over. But he was still trying to spin it. He was still trying to sell the lie. "I am not confused, Brandon," I said. My voice didn't need a microphone. It was projected from the diaphragm trained in boardrooms where billions of dollars were at stake. It was deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. I have never been more clear in my life. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. They looked from the impeccably dressed man on the stairs to the sweating, panicked man on the stage. The contrast was brutal. "Security!" Brandon shouted, his voice cracking into a scream. Where is security? Escort him out. He's having an episode. He waved his arms at the doors, desperate for anyone to remove the evidence of his fraud. But no one moved. The hired security guards by the door looked at each other confused. They didn't work for Brandon. They worked for the event planner, and they knew authority when they saw it. And authority wasn't the man screaming on the stage. Authority was the man standing still on the stairs. There is no episode, son, I said, taking another step down. There is only the truth. And it is time everyone here heard it. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for me, instinctively creating a wide aisle between me and the podium. I walked through them. I could smell their expensive perfumes and their fear. They knew a disaster was happening, and they couldn't look away. I walked right up to the edge of the platform. I looked up at my son. You wanted to show them your empire, Brandon, I said, my voice low and intimate yet audible to everyone in the front row. You wanted to show them your foundation. I gestured to the room, to the house, to the lie. Well, here I am. I am the foundation, and I am crumbling. Brandon began to shake. He looked at Monica for help, but she was frozen, staring at the cracked screen of her phone on the floor. He looked at the investors. They were staring at me. Dad, please, he whispered, tears of panic welling in his eyes. Don't do this. Not tonight. We can talk. I'll sign anything. Just go back upstairs. It's too late for signatures, I said. And then the heavy double doors at the main entrance swung open with a boom that shook the glass in the windows. Leonard Katz walked in. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were 4 men in tactical gear, the word security emblazoned on their vests. And behind them walked a quiet, elegant couple who looked around the room with the proprietary air of people who had just bought a very expensive item and found it cluttered with trash. The trap was sprung. The glamour was about to be stripped away, revealing the rot underneath. I looked at Brandon one last time. I hope you enjoyed the party, son, I said, because the bill has just come due. The silence that followed Leonard's entrance was not the stunned quiet of the previous moment. It was a different quality of silence, heavy with the scent of impending violence. The 4 men flanking Leonard were not the rental cops you hire for a gallery opening. They were professionals. They wore tactical black uniforms that absorbed the strobe lights, and their eyes scanned the room with the bored efficiency of men who had cleared rooms much more dangerous than a Malibu cocktail party. Leonard Katz walked through the center of the formation, clutching his leather briefcase like a weapon. Behind him, Mr. and Mrs. Chen stepped into the light. They were an unassuming couple in their 60s, dressed in understated beige and navy, looking around the atrium with critical, assessing eyes. Mrs. Chen frowned at the ice sculpture melting onto the hardwood floor. Mr. Chen tapped a finger against his chin as he looked at the lighting rig drilled into the ceiling. They didn't look like guests. They looked like landlords inspecting a damaged rental. Brandon scrambled off the podium, nearly tripping over his own feet. He rushed toward them, his face a mask of furious confusion. He waved his hands at the security team, trying to shoo them away like stray dogs. "Who are you?" he screamed, his voice cracking under the strain. "Get out. This is a private residence. Where is the event?" "Security? I paid for security." He hadn't paid for security. I knew his bank statements better than he did. He had paid for the champagne and the flowers, gambling that the appearance of wealth would generate the actual cash before the vendors came looking for their checks. One of the tactical officers stepped forward, blocking Brandon's path with a wall of muscle. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his hand resting casually near his belt. Brandon stopped short, bouncing off the invisible barrier of authority. Leonard stepped around the guard. He adjusted his glasses, looking at Brandon with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Mr. Holloway." Leonard said, his voice calm but carrying to the back of the room. "I believe there is a misunderstanding. This is indeed a private residence. However, it is no longer yours." What are you talking about? Brandon spat sweat flying from his forehead. Of course it's mine. My father gave it to me. He's right there, ask him. He pointed a shaking finger at me. I stood motionless on the stairs, watching the scene unfold like a Greek tragedy I had directed. Leonard didn't look at me. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a sheaf of documents bound in a blue legal folder. He held them up, turning them so the light caught the embossed seal of the county recorder. This is a confirmed deed transfer time-stamped 45 minutes ago, Leonard announced. The property located at 1240 Ocean Drive has been sold. The title has passed from Terra Firma Holdings LLC to the Chen Family Trust. He gestured to the quiet couple behind him. Meet your new landlords, Brandon. Although technically, since there is no lease agreement in place, you are simply trespassers. The room erupted. It wasn't a cheer. It was a low, panicked rumble of conversation. The investors were pulling out their phones, checking property records, realizing they were standing in a house of cards. Sold. Brandon whispered the word, choking him. You can't sell it. It's in the LLC, which my client owns 100% of, Leonard corrected smoothly. And as the sole managing member, he executed an emergency liquidation sale this morning. The funds have cleared. The deal is closed. Brandon spun around to look at me. His eyes were wide-rimmed with red, filled with a betrayal that was almost comical given what he had done to me. You sold my house, he screamed. You sold my house while I was throwing a party. I walked down the final 3 steps. I approached him slowly. The crowd parted further, giving us a wide berth. The air conditioning hummed, but the room felt suffocatingly hot. It was never your house, Brandon, I said, my voice steady. It was an investment. And it was a failing investment. So I liquidated it. But the launch, he wailed, gesturing at the banners, the screens, the expensive lies he had pasted over the walls. I need this house. I need the equity. The loan was approved. The loan, I said, cutting him off, was fraudulent. You attempted to mortgage a property you didn't own using a power of attorney. You forced a distressed man to sign. I believe that is called attempted grand larceny. I looked past him toward the back of the room near the bar. The large man in the ill-fitting suit, the loan shark's enforcer, was putting his drink down. He was watching Brandon with a look that was no longer bored. It was calculating. He was realizing the collateral for his boss's $2 million had just evaporated. Brandon followed my gaze. He saw the man. He paled, his skin turning the color of old ash. Leonard stepped forward again, checking his watch. Mr. Halloway. Mrs. Halloway, he said, addressing Monica, who was still frozen by the fountain. The terms of the sale were very specific. The property was sold vacant and free of occupants. That means the new owners require immediate possession. Possession, Monica squeaked. But we live here. All our stuff is here. My clothes, my studio. Leonard shook his head. The contract specified that the property was sold as is with all contents included. He paused, letting the words sink in. That means the furniture, the art, the electronics, and yes, the clothes in the closets, now belong to Mr. and Mrs. Chen. You are to leave the premises immediately. You may take only what is on your person. No, Monica shrieked, the sound tearing through the room. You can't do that. My purses, my jewelry is upstairs. Your jewelry, I interrupted, purchased with the credit cards I have been paying off for 5 years, is now the property of the estate. Consider it a partial repayment for the fraud. Mr. Chen stepped forward. He spoke for the first time. His voice was heavily accented, but crystal clear. I want them out, he said to Leonard. Now. I want to change the locks. This party, it is dirty. Too many people. Leonard nodded to the security team. You heard the owner, Leonard said. Clear the room. The security guards moved. They didn't run. They flowed into the crowd with practiced efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, the lead guard announced, his voice booming. This is private property. You are trespassing. Please exit through the front doors immediately. The police have been notified and are en route to assist with the eviction. The mention of police was the final straw. The crowd broke. The socialites, the bankers, the tech bros, they all scrambled for the door. No one wanted to be associated with a police raid. No one wanted their name in the paper next to a fraud investigation. They dropped their champagne flutes on the tables. They abandoned their half-eaten appetizers. They pushed past Brandon, as if he were invisible. "Wait," Brandon shouted, grabbing the arm of a venture capitalist he had been courting for months. "Jerry, wait. It's a misunderstanding. My dad is... He's having a breakdown. The paperwork is a mess. I can fix it." Jerry shook him off with a look of pure disgust. "Don't touch me, kid," the investor snarled. "You don't own the house. You don't own the IP. You wasted my night. Lose my number." Brandon stood there, his hand still reaching out, grasping at air. The room was emptying fast. The caterers were abandoning their stations, fleeing out the back kitchen entrance. The DJ had already cut the power and was packing his laptop. Monica ran to me. She grabbed the lapels of my jacket. Her eyes were wild, her makeup smearing. "Victor, please," she begged. "You can't let them take my things. My grandmother's ring is in the safe upstairs." I looked down at her hands on my suit. I carefully peeled her fingers off the fabric. "Your grandmother's ring," I said coldly, "was pawned 3 months ago. I saw the ticket in the mail. You sold it to pay for the lease on the Bentley." She gasped, stepping back, her hand flying to her mouth. "How did you—" "I know everything, Monica," I said. "I know about the pawn shops. I know about the credit cards. I know about the conversation through the bathroom door." I leaned in close to her face. "I heard you tell him to let me die." She flinched, as if I had struck her. She looked at Brandon, then back at me, realizing the depth of the abyss they had fallen into. The room was almost empty now. Only the security team, Leonard the Chens, and the loan shark's man remained. The enforcer hadn't left. He was leaning against a pillar, watching Brandon. He took out his phone and typed a message. Brandon saw him. The panic that had been frantic energy turned into cold, paralyzing terror. He knew what that message meant. It meant the debt was being called in. And without the house, he had no way to pay. "Dad," Brandon whispered. He dropped to his knees. He didn't care about his suit. He didn't care about his dignity. He crawled toward me on the marble floor. "Dad, you have to stop this. They're going to kill me. Those men. The loan. If I don't have the house..." I looked down at my son. He was weeping. Snot ran down his nose. He looked pathetic. He looked like the child who used to come crying to me when he broke a neighbor's window. But this wasn't a broken window. This was a broken life. "I warned you," I said. "I told you for years to build something real. I told you to work. But you wanted the shortcut. You wanted the appearance of wealth without the labor." I crouched down so I was eye level with him. "You locked me in a bathroom for 4 days, Brandon. You deprived me of water. You debated whether to call an ambulance or a hearse. You didn't just break the law. You broke the covenant between father and son." "Dad." "I was desperate," he sobbed. "I didn't mean it. You meant every word I said. You just didn't think I was listening." I stood up. I brushed invisible dust from my knees. I walked over to the DJ booth where a microphone still sat on the table connected to the dying sound system. I picked it up. I looked around the cavernous room. The flowers were wilting. The ice sculptures were melting into puddles. The floor was littered with broken glass and abandoned napkins. It looked like the aftermath of a riot. "Attention," I said into the mic. My voice echoed through the empty house, bouncing off the high ceilings. "Mr. Brandon Halloway and Mrs. Monica Halloway, you are hereby evicted. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before the security team physically removes you." I looked at the Chens. They nodded. Mr. Chen checked his watch. 4 minutes. Mr. Chen corrected loudly. Brandon looked at me one last time. He looked for a crack in the armor. He looked for the father who had bailed him out of jail when he was 20, who had paid his debts when he was 25. He found only the architect. And the architect had condemned the building. "Come on, Monica!" Brandon choked out, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed her hand. "Let's go, we need to go, now!" Why, she screamed, pulling away. "We can't just leave." "Look at the guy by the pillar," Brandon hissed. "We have to run." He dragged her toward the door. They ran past me. They ran past Leonard. They ran past the security guards. They ran out into the cool night air, leaving behind their clothes, their jewelry, their furniture, and their dignity. They ran toward the valet stand, only to realize the valet had already left with the keys to the leased Bentley, which I had also canceled an hour ago. I watched them go. I watched them disappear into the darkness of the driveway, two shadows fleeing the light they had tried to steal. I put the microphone down. I walked over to Leonard. "It's done," Leonard said quietly. "Yes," I said. "It is." Mr. Chen walked over to me. He extended a hand. "Mr. Holloway," he said. "Thank you. The house. It has good bones. We will fix the energy. It needs a lot of sage," I said, shaking his hand. "And maybe a priest." I looked around the room one last time. I looked at the spot where I had stood on the stairs. I looked at the dining table where I had spilled the wine. I looked at the hallway leading to the bathroom that had been my prison. I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Just a clean, hollow silence, the silence of a debt paid in full. I turned to Leonard. "Is the car ready? It's waiting," Leonard said. "Your luggage is in the trunk. The flight leaves in 3 hours." "Let's go," I said. I walked out of the villa. I didn't look back. I stepped into the cool night air of Malibu, breathing in the salt and the freedom. Behind me, I heard the heavy thud of the front doors closing and the sharp final click of a lock turning. The Chens were securing their property. My son was homeless. My life was my own again. And Tuscany was waiting. The grand atrium moments ago, a cathedral of noise and ego, was now echoing with the frantic scuffling of a stampede. It was a beautiful, terrible sight. The elite of Malibu, the venture capitalists in their bespoke tuxedos, and the influencers in their rented gowns were tripping over each other to escape the blast radius of my son's failure. They abandoned their drinks on the antique side tables. They left their gift bags on the floor. It wasn't just an exit. It was a desertion. They smelled the stench of fraud, and in this town that smell sticks to you longer than smoke. I watched them go, standing like a statue in the center of the ruin. I felt a cold, hollow satisfaction. This was the network Brandon had bragged about. These were the friends he claimed were better than family. They didn't even look back at him. They just ran to their cars, desperate to scrub his name from their contact lists before the subpoenas started arriving. But not everyone left. Near the bar, the large man in the ill-fitting suit hadn't moved. He wasn't running. He was standing perfectly still, his hands folded in front of him, watching the exodus with the detached amusement of a predator watching a herd scatter. He wasn't an investor. He wasn't a friend. He was the bill collector. And he knew with the mathematical certainty of his profession that the collateral for his loan had just walked out the door in the pocket of my lawyer. He caught my eye. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just shifted his gaze slowly, deliberately to Brandon. It was a look that promised violence. It was a look that said the clock has stopped ticking, and now the collection begins. Brandon didn't see him. He was too busy spinning in circles, screaming at the retreating backs of his guests. "Come back. It's a mistake. The legal team is handling it. We have the funding. Jerry, Mike, don't leave. No one turned around. The heavy front doors slammed shut one after another, sealing the tomb. Brandon turned to me. His face was a ruin. The spray tan was streaked with sweat and tears. His eyes were wild, manic, unable to process the reality crashing down on him. He looked at the security guards methodically ushering the last stragglers out. He looked at the Chen family, who were already pointing at the walls, discussing which art to remove. Then the shock broke, replaced by a surge of pure, entitled rage. He charged at me. "What did you do?" he screamed, his voice shredding his throat. "What the hell did you do?" He stopped inches from my face, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to hit me. I could see the impulse twitching in his muscles, but he didn't dare. Not with the security team watching. Not with the Iron Architect standing tall in his armor. "You're insane," he yelled, spitting the words at me. "You're senile. You can't sell this house. It's mine. I built this life. I built this brand. You gave it to me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had spent 35 years taking and taking, convinced that the world owed him a living just for existing. "I didn't give you anything," I said, my voice low and hard. "I lent you a stage, and you used it to perform a tragedy." "No. This is my home," he shrieked, stamping his foot like a petulant child. "My name is on the—" "Your name is on nothing," I cut him off. "Your name is on the utility bills. Your name is on the junk mail. But the deed, the title that belonged to Terra Firma Holdings, and I am Terra Firma." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Brandon flinched as if expecting a weapon. In a way it was. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a legal notice. It was a cashier's check. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, smoothing the crease with my thumb. I held it up. The overhead lights caught the holographic watermark, shimmering green and gold. "Look at it, Brandon," I commanded. "Read the number." He stared at the paper. His eyes darted across the line. $6,500,000. It was the net proceeds from the sale minus the rush fees, the taxes, and the payoff of the existing mortgage I had carried. It was a fortune. It was enough money to start 10 legitimate businesses. It was enough money to retire on an island. It was enough money to save his life. "This is the house," I said. "This is the roof over your head. This is the view of the ocean. This is the marble floors and the high ceilings. It's all right here on this piece of paper." Brandon reached for it. His hand shot out a reflex of pure greed. "Give it to me," he gasped. "Dad, give it to me. I can fix this. I can pay them off. I can buy it back." I pulled the check away, tucking it back into my pocket. "No," I said. "You can't." "Why?" he wailed, falling to his knees again. "Why are you doing this to me? I'm your son, because for 10 years I let you live here," I said, looking down at him. "I let you pretend you were a king, because I hoped, I prayed, that if I gave you the environment of success, you would eventually find the substance of it. I thought if I removed the struggle, you would use your energy to build." I paused, letting the silence of the empty room amplify my words. "But you didn't build, Brandon. You rotted. You became soft. You became entitled. And 4 days ago, you became a monster." I stepped closer, forcing him to look up at me. "You locked me in a bathroom," I whispered. "You cut off the water. You listened to me begging for help, and you laughed. You talked about my death as a line item on a spreadsheet. You were willing to let me die of thirst just so you could keep pretending for 1 more month." "I didn't mean it," he sobbed, grabbing at my pant leg. "I was stressed. I was scared. We are all scared." I shouted, my voice finally breaking the calm facade, echoing like thunder. "That is not an excuse for parricide." I yanked my leg away from his grasp. "I intended to leave this house to you, Brandon. It was in my will. It was in the trust." When I died, all of this would have been yours. The millions, the property, the legacy. All you had to do was wait. All you had to do was be a decent human being. I patted the pocket where the check lay against my heart. But 4 days in the dark gave me a lot of time to think. It gave me a lot of time to reevaluate my investments. And I realized that leaving this money to you wouldn't be a gift. It would be a weapon. It would only feed the sickness that is eating you alive. I looked over his shoulder at the enforcer. The man had pushed off the pillar. He was walking toward us. He moved slowly, heavy steps that vibrated the floor. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on Brandon. I'd rather burn this money, I said, my voice dropping to a cold, final register. I'd rather shred this check and swallow the pieces than use a single cent of it to bail you out of the hell you created. I'd rather sell my home for a loss than let it shelter a man who would kill his father for a loan. Dad, look behind you, Brandon screamed, seeing the man approaching. That guy. He's going to hurt me. You have to help me. You have the money. Just pay him. I turned. I looked at the enforcer. He stopped 10 feet away. He nodded at me, a gesture of respect from one professional to another. He knew I wasn't the mark. He knew I wasn't the debtor. I turned back to Brandon. I don't have to do anything I said. I am not your bank. I am not your safety net. I am the victim of your crime. And victims don't pay the ransom. But he'll kill me, Brandon shrieked, scrambling backward, crab-walking across the floor. Then maybe you should run, I said. I turned away. I didn't want to see his face anymore. I didn't want to see the tears that were only for himself. I didn't want to see the son I had lost years ago. I walked toward the door where Leonard was waiting. The Chens were instructing the security team to sweep the upstairs. The party was over. The cleanup had begun. Brandon's screams followed me. Not screams of apology. Screams of blame. You're ruining me. This is your fault, you selfish old man. I kept walking. I walked past the melting ice sculpture. I walked past the abandoned trays of caviar. I walked out the front door and down the steps to the driveway. The air outside was crisp and clean, smelling of eucalyptus and the sea. It cleansed my lungs of the perfume and the lies. The black car was waiting, engine idling. The trunk was open. My suitcase was inside. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I looked up at the house one last time. The lights were blazing in every window, a lighthouse of vanity. But inside it was hollow. It was just wood and stone and glass. It wasn't a home. It never had been. Behind me I heard the heavy thud of the front door slamming shut. Then, the distinct mechanical click of a deadbolt sliding home. The lock worked perfectly. I got into the car. Leonard closed the door. Drive, I said. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back at the driveway where my son was presumably trying to explain to a very angry man why he was homeless and broke. I looked forward, toward the airport, toward Italy, toward a life where the only person I had to trust was myself. The check in my pocket felt light. It wasn't money anymore. It was freedom. And freedom, I realized as we sped into the night, has a price. I had just paid it, and it was worth every penny. The night air tasted of salt and finality as I descended the stone steps. Every footfall on the driveway felt lighter than the last, as if gravity itself were releasing its hold on me. Behind me the villa glowed like a tomb, a mausoleum of ambition that had swallowed my son whole. I didn't need to turn around to know what was happening inside. I could feel the frantic energy of the collapse. The desperate phone calls being made, the realization that the safety net had been set on fire. The Blacktown car was waiting at the curb, its engine purring, with a low, steady rhythm that sounded like escape. The driver, a man Leonard had vetted personally, stood by the open rear door. He didn't look at the house. He looked at me, his expression professional and blank. He saw a man leaving a party early. He didn't know he was witnessing a man leaving a life behind. I reached the car. I saw my leather valise on the seat. It contained my passport, the deed to the vineyard in Tuscany I had quietly purchased 6 months ago, and the burner phone. It was everything I needed. It was everything I owned now, or at least everything that mattered. I placed a hand on the roof of the car, ready to slide into the dark interior and vanish. But chaos, I had learned, rarely lets you leave without one last scream. "Victor, wait, please." The voice was shrill, tearing through the calm of the night. I paused. I didn't want to turn. I wanted to get in the car and close the door on this chapter forever. But I knew I had one last loose end to tie, one last message to deliver. I turned slowly. Monica was running down the driveway. She had lost a shoe. She was limping, her expensive gown torn at the hem where she must have tripped in her haste. Her hair, usually a helmet of perfect lacquer, was wild and windblown. Mascara ran down her cheeks in black rivulets, making her look like a tragic clown in a play that had gone horribly wrong. She reached me, breathless and gasping, clutching her side. She grabbed my arm with claw-like fingers. Her grip was desperate, painful. "Victor, you can't go," she sobbed, her chest heaving. "You can't leave us like this. They'll kill him. Those men, they'll kill Brandon if we don't pay." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. I looked at her face. I searched for any sign of the woman I had welcomed into my family 5 years ago. I searched for the daughter-in-law I had tried to love. I found only a stranger who had walked past a locked bathroom door and laughed. "We were desperate," she wailed, reading the coldness in my eyes. "We didn't want to hurt you, we got in over our heads. The business failed. The loans piled up. We were drowning, Victor. We just needed a lifeline. We were Tung Kwa Hua Liu. We just needed the money to start over, Tung Kwa Hua Liu." Desperation breeds recklessness. It was a pathetic excuse. Desperation might make you steal bread. Desperation might make you lie. But desperation does not make you torture an old man. Cruelty does that. Greed does that. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "You didn't need a lifeline, Monica," I said, my voice soft but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "You needed a victim, and you chose me because you thought I was weak." I turned and got into the car. I sat on the plush leather, the smell of new upholstery filling my nose. I signaled the driver. He began to close the door. "No," Monica shrieked, throwing herself against the door, preventing it from latching. She pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging it up. "Please, give us something, anything. You have millions, you can't leave us with nothing. We're family." Family. The word had lost all meaning. It was just a sound she used to manipulate a key she tried to jam into a lock she had already broken. I looked at her through the window. I saw the naked greed behind the panic. She wasn't crying for Brandon. She wasn't crying for the family. She was crying because the ATM was driving away. I sighed. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. I had prepared it that morning, sitting in the maid's room while Brandon screamed at the florists. It was sealed with wax. It looked heavy. It looked valuable. I rolled down the window 3 inches. Monica stopped screaming. Her eyes locked onto the envelope. Hope, cruel and sharp, flared in her face. She thought I had broken. She thought it was a check. She thought it was salvation. "You're right," I said. "I can't leave you empty-handed." "That wouldn't be fair, would it? Thank you," she gasped, reaching for the envelope through the crack in the window. "Oh, thank you, Victor. I knew you loved us. I knew you wouldn't let us fall." I held onto the envelope for a second longer, letting her feel the weight of it. "This is for you," I said. "Use it wisely." I let go. She snatched it as if it were gold bullion. She clutched it to her chest, closing her eyes in relief. "Go," I said to the driver. The window rolled up, sealing me inside the quiet, air-conditioned sanctuary of the car. The driver hit the gas. The car surged forward, tires gripping the pavement. As we pulled away, I watched in the side mirror. Monica was standing under the street lamp, tearing the envelope open with frantic fingers. She ripped the top off, shaking the contents into her hand. There was no check. There was no cash. 2 pieces of paper fluttered out. The first was a utility bill. It was the water bill for the villa, dated for the current month. I had highlighted a single line item, the service reconnection fee. It was $40. The exact price of the water she had denied me while I lay dying of thirst. I had paid it this morning. It was the only debt of theirs I would ever settle. The second piece of paper was a receipt. It was a donation acknowledgement from the largest homeless shelter in Los Angeles. It listed a donation in the amount of $2,100,000. It was the remainder of my liquid assets, everything I didn't need for my retirement in Italy. I watched her figure shrink in the mirror. I saw her stare at the papers. I saw her knees buckle. I saw her collapse onto the gravel of the driveway, screaming into the night, clutching the receipt for the fortune she had murdered her soul to get, and which was now feeding strangers in a soup kitchen downtown. She was screaming at the taillights, but I couldn't hear her. The glass was thick. The car was fast. I turned my head and looked forward. The road to the airport was open and clear. The ocean was a dark expanse to my left, vast and indifferent. I reached into my pocket and touched my passport. The water bill was paid. The house was gone. The money was gone. And so was I. I closed my eyes and let the motion of the car rock me. For the first time in 4 days, for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't thirsty. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't tired. I was just free. The sun here is different. In Malibu, the sun was a spotlight, harsh and demanding, bleaching the color out of everything it touched. Here in Tuscany, the sun is gold. It sits heavy and warm on the shoulders, smelling of baked earth and Sangiovese grapes. I sat on the stone terrace of the small farmhouse I had restored, a glass of deep red wine resting on the table beside a plate of olives and pecorino cheese. It was quiet. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of contentment. The only sound was the wind rustling the cypress trees and the distant hum of a tractor working the valley floor. I took a sip of the wine. It was robust, earthy, and honest. It tasted like the soil it grew in. It didn't taste like leverage or debt. It tasted like patience. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a rare sound these days. I had changed my number the moment I landed in Rome. Only one person had it. I picked it up. A message from Leonard. It was short, professional, and devastatingly final. The indictment came down this morning. Federal charges for wire fraud and identity theft regarding the loan application. The state is also pursuing charges for the forged medical documents. Bail was denied due to flight risk. He is currently in county custody awaiting trial. I read the words twice. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a quiet, somber closing of a door. My son was going to prison. It was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy he had written, directed, and starred in. I was just the audience member who had walked out before the final act. There was a second part to the message. Monica filed for divorce yesterday. She cited irreconcilable differences. My source says she moved back in with her parents in Ohio. She took the dog but left the debts. I set the phone down, face down on the stone table. The partnership of greed had dissolved the moment the money ran out. It was predictable. Parasites do not stick together when the host body dies. They scatter to find new blood. Brandon was alone now. He was facing the consequences of his entitlement in a concrete cell, without his wife, without his house, and without his father to bail him out. I looked out over the rolling hills, watching the shadows lengthen as evening approached. For 40 years, I had built structures of steel and glass, thinking I was building a legacy. I was wrong. A legacy isn't what you build for people. It's what you build in them. I had failed to build character in my son, and perhaps that was my sin to bear. But I had refused to let his lack of character destroy the end of my life. I picked up the wine glass again, swirling the dark liquid. The light caught the ruby depths. It was simple. It was unpretentious. It was real. I thought about the champagne tower at the party. I thought about the crystal flutes and the hollow toasts to a fake future. I raised my glass to the setting sun, to the quiet valley, and to the empty chair opposite me that would never again be filled by someone who wished me harm. To freedom, I whispered to the Tuscan air. I took a drink. It was rich and complex, with notes of cherry and leather. Freedom, I realized as the warmth spread through my chest, tastes better than any champagne ever could. I finished the glass, watched the sun dip below the horizon, and for the first time in a long time, I looked forward to tomorrow. I spent a lifetime believing that providing for my son was the ultimate expression of love. I shielded him from the rain, never realizing I was robbing him of the ability to build his own shelter. My 4 days in that dark bathroom taught me a brutal truth. Entitlement is a cancer that grows in the absence of struggle. We cannot buy the character of our children, nor can we purchase their respect. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is close the checkbook and open the door to reality. I chose my dignity over my biological obligation, and for the first time in years, I am whole. If you believe that no one should ever sacrifice their self-worth for family, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience.